There's no such thing as imposter syndrome. It's the inside catching up with the outside. And I love that. I love that there's no power to it. It's not imposter syndrome. It's just I'm doing something new and I am learning from it. Hello and welcome to the Rebalance Earth podcast. I'm Kirsty Wilman, COO at Rebalance Earth, and we've taken over the podcast for International Women's Day. I'm joined by Liberty Scutcher, an investment analyst, and we're going to talk all things career, confidence, and anything else. So let's get to it, Liberty. Why don't you tell everyone a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm 23. I just moved into a flat with some friends in London. I studied at Bristol University. I'm an older sister. My little sister is 7 years younger than me.
And you've just started your career.
Yes.
So why a career in investment?
Well, I never thought I would go into investment, to be honest. From about 17, always knew I wanted to work for a startup. Mm-hmm. So I then studied innovation at university because I wanted to eventually work for a startup. So I was always set on that. And I was really looking for opportunities in the environmental space or any kind of impact. And so I applied for literally, I'd say hundreds of startups, tried to get experience, and I got a few pieces of experience and just fell in love with it even more. And then I got in contact with Rob, did 5 days of work experience and got completely sucked in. And I think when I was learning about Rebalance Earth and the proposition, it just clicked in my mind that this is something that I really wanted to be part of because it had the potential to have so much impact. And I think that's what really drew me in.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm other end of the spectrum where I've always worked for big companies till working here.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we delve into a bit about your career path? Obviously, it's changed recently, but I'd love to hear about, your career.
And it's all mostly by accident, actually. So I did a history degree, knew that I needed to get a job straight out of university. And so qualified as an accountant at a mid-tier firm, which was very much about having career stability and, having a career path. I spent 8 years in audit, which was an amazing learning curve, and then moved into investment management and actually into real estate investment management. And again, the investment management piece for me was by accident. The real estate was the link that I'd looked after lots of real estate companies during my years in audit, and so moved into real estate investment management. Spent 14 years in a big company and then moved here about 9 months ago.
So I'd love to hear where you were when you were my age. How were you thinking about your career? Where did you think you were going to end up when you were, your age now?
So I was training to be an accountant when I was your age, had a flat in London. That beautiful part in your 20s where you're living in London for the first time, you've got a bit more money and really enjoying life, as you are now. I was working at a mid-tier firm. Funnily enough, this really ages me, but actually a firm where 2 years before I started, they changed the rules so women were allowed to wear trousers at work, which is crazy when you think back to that. I do think it was quite a traditional place, so that probably wasn't the norm at the time. But yeah, it wasn't that much of a surprise.
So you didn't think you'd be working for a startup now? No,
not in a million years. I mean, I think I'm very risk averse and was always looking for stability, and that's why I trained to be an accountant. So working for a startup felt like it was a really risky thing to do, and I would never have predicted I'd have stuck with big companies. Now I'm at a startup. I love it. I love the fact that we can drive true innovation. We can be really agile in how we do things. And it's really exciting. We're building something really special, and you can feel that every day when we're at work.
I'd love to hear how things have changed. So obviously I'm in early stage of my career. I've only been in the industry for 10 months. Yeah. But I'd love to hear from you. Do you think it's changed from when you were my age? Is it changing quick enough? anything?
It's definitely changed. When I started, and certainly in accountancy, there was always a fairly even gender split, but at the junior level and at the senior level, there was always a lot fewer women. The biggest change is we didn't really talk about it. So we didn't really talk about why it matters, why we should embrace diversity. We just accepted there were fewer women. And so the massive change for me has been that we recognise that this is an issue. We recognise that this is about good business outcomes. It's not about, trying to do the right thing. It's about actually it drives performance for companies. So that's been a massive change. Is it changing fast enough? Oh, no. I feel really sad about how slowly it's changing. And certainly with all the stuff in the US of DEI is out, it's just so sad that we've come full circle so quickly. I think the interesting thing is companies are saying, from a legislative perspective in the US, things, DEI might not be a requirement anymore, but companies are finding that they've still got shareholder pressure to push that DEI agenda. So that, for me, that's the win, the real recognition that diversity drives better outcomes.
And from your perspective, what do you think we should be doing to make sure that we are improving and it is getting better?
I think for me, the massive thing is it's about cultural change. It's not about changing the rules. We, years ago, changed the rules on shared parental leave. And, now dads have got the same rights as mums to the same amount of time off. But the uptake is so low. And I think a lot of that is to do with culture, of making it much more acceptable for men to take time out from their careers, for their families, and for men to leave the office to go and pick their kids up. And for that to just be acceptable, that we can balance our, you can have a challenging and interesting career and you can balance that with also being a present parent. And I think that applies in lots of ways, but the change is cultural. Let's make it acceptable. Let's keep talking about it rather than changing the rules. Because when you change the rules, it doesn't make people adopt them.
And also, I think we were discussing how it's all about setting the tone within the company, that this is how things are here. This is the standard, that we set ourselves to, and making sure that it filters down into, everyone.
Yeah. And recognising, where we work, our CEO, Rob, he's a very present and active parent. And that really sets the tone that we don't need permission to be able to balance our lives. And actually, that's not at the expense of work. We're all, probably slightly obsessed with Rebalance Earth. But it's about making sure that we can enjoy our lives and deliver what we need to in the workplace. It's not one at the expense of the other.
Yeah, so I'm going to delve in a bit more about how you juggle being a mum of 3.
Yeah.
And Edith, who is quite young.
Yeah.
And
the boss. She's the boss, as we all know.
Yeah, exactly. And having this responsibility, at Rebalance Earth is huge. I just love to hear how you manage that and that dynamic, because to me it's impressive.
And I think that's it's funny because on the outside it might look impressive, but the reality is it is a massive juggle. And I firmly think that we were the generation that slightly got sold down the river, that we were told you can have it all, you can do everything. And I don't think you can have it all. And I think, I don't know if you watched the Barbie movie, but America Ferrera has her little rant in the middle about how we're expected to be amazing mothers and good in the workplace. And by the way, you have to go to Pilates and lose weight and all of those things. And I almost stood up in the cinema and started cheering because I agreed with it so strongly. And I think it's about finding the things that you value and prioritising those. And it's about accepting that sometimes you feel like you're doing a rubbish job at work. Sometimes you feel like you're doing a rubbish job at home. Sometimes you feel like you're rubbish at both. And sometimes you're absolutely nailing both and it's brilliant. But sort of not setting expectations unrealistically high. And also a thing that I've learned quite recently is talk to yourself how you would talk to someone else. So when you're beating yourself up about having dropped the ball on something, I was telling you the other day about walking my kids to school one day, getting to the school gates and looking around and thinking no other kids are wearing school uniform. And I realised I'd forgotten that it was non-uniform day. and we ran home and I got the kids changed and we ran back to school and we still got there on time. But and the kids were fine. And for the rest of the day, I just felt rubbish. I felt like I'd let them down in such a big way. Because whilst it's not big in the grand scheme of things, it was important to them. And thinking about, like, if a friend told me that, I would say, don't worry about it. But I still beat myself up about it. And I think,
hold
just
yourself
giving yourself
such a high standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember thinking, because I think you only really realise it when you're older, unfortunately, is that, like, your mum and both your parents are living life for the first time as well, and they're trying to figure out how to do it as well, and you only realize that when you're almost when you're older and it's too late. But me and my mum were talking about it this weekend, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like, you're figuring it out just as much as I am.
Totally. And I said that to my nearly 13-year-old of, like, I do make mistakes because I've never done this before. I've never been a parent to a teenager, and I'm terrified about being a parent to a teenager. But reminding him that I don't have all the answers. And you just, you've got that, like, innate faith that your parents know what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, the massive lesson to me is I don't. and I'm trying really hard. But I am, a lot of the time, making it up along the way. And that's okay. Yeah. Well, so far it's been okay. We'll see. Let's talk about last week. You had a big week and you did something you were scared of. So let's talk a bit about what you did and why and how.
Yeah, so last week I hosted an event. I was sort of like running the panel. And I signed up. Well, I didn't sign up, actually. I was nudged to take on this role. And at the time I was like, 100%, like so keen to do it. And then it came to a couple of weeks before and I was suddenly like, oh my goodness. I think I spoke to you and I was like, Kirsty, I'm actually quite nervous about doing this because I've never done, or at least I've done stuff in like a university context, but not in front of a room of people like this. Yeah. So I was nervous. So I did as much preparation as I could. And I spoke to actually you and Anne from Rebalance. And the thing that, I don't know whether you both meant to do this because you did it separately, but you both said the same thing to me, which was like you weren't changing what I was saying or like any of my content points. You were saying, well, you need to, hold yourself like this and come across as confident. And you were just both coaching me on like how I deliver it with confidence rather than delivering it and feeling like almost a bit uncomfortable and almost like I shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. I think you both just really helped me find my style and how I wanted to do it, because when I actually stood up and did it, when I said the first word, I didn't feel nervous anymore and I didn't have to think. It just sort of all came together.
You were so good. You were so, you looked like a complete natural. And I don't think anyone would have believed that it was your first time presenting like that. And it was good. A room of important people. And I thought you did an amazing job. But I think part of that is because you did it in your style. And I think Anne and I didn't talk beforehand about what we were saying to you. But it was very much about find your own style. And, it's so hard sometimes because you look at what other people are doing and you think they're brilliant at what they do. So I'll try and do it like that. And it doesn't work. It's just, it comes across as really fake and you feel really uncomfortable because you're trying to be someone you're not. Yeah. And I think the best thing that you can do is do things your way, look at what other people are doing, get advice from everyone and anyone, and then pick the bits that you like and pick the bits that work for you. And actually, funnily enough, before the event, Anne gave me some advice as well. And I think that's the thing, like, know that you're always learning, you're always improving, you're always refining it. And actually, we had a moment beforehand, didn't we? Of like, as it was about to start, as the presentations were about to start, you leaned over and said,
I was like, Kirsty, I'm quite nervous. And you looked at me and you were like, I'm nervous too. And it actually made me feel like so much, it made me feel calm because I realised that I wasn't the only one that was feeling like there was a bit of pressure on the situation. So I found it comforting to know that you were nervous as well because I was worrying, am I the only one?
But I think that also helps with confidence because I think you look at other people and you think they're so good at doing that and they're so comfortable and I'm never going to be like that. And when you realise that everyone else is feeling the same on the inside, then you go, okay, well, that's all right, because I can't tell that she's nervous, so maybe people can't tell that I'm nervous.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, you do the thing, and now, like, if someone said to you, we're hosting another event, you would
I'd
jump
feel
at it.
more confident, you know, accepting a role like that again, because I've got one.
Yeah. But you've proved you can do it.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is, you prove you can do it, and you expand your comfort zone, and you feel comfortable doing all these things, and then you do something new.
Yeah.
And you feel nervous with that. And that never changes in your career. You're always doing something that is slightly... I had this amazing coach who was fantastic and actually quite pivotal in my career. And one of the things she always says is, there's no such thing as imposter syndrome. It's the inside catching up with the outside. And I love that. I love that there's no power to it. It's not imposter syndrome. It's just I'm doing something new and I am learning from it.
Pushing yourself.
Yeah. But if you stop doing that, you get bored.
Yeah.
So there's always something that's going to make you nervous.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing.
No. So you were saying earlier that you're quite risk averse, but obviously recently you've decided to change career. How was that decision for you?
So I went from being really risk averse and making all of the decisions about how I balance my life and, you know, having flexibility and time with the kids and everything else. And then I handed my notice in without a job to go to. So I went from one extreme to the other. Literally the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. Partly the environment had changed. So I used to work from home a day a week pre-COVID, and it was really weird. Like, it was accepted because I was a mum, but it wasn't the norm. And frequently I'd join a call and people would really openly say, oh, you're in the garden drinking Pims. And I'd be thinking, no, actually I'm working really hard, but thanks. But it wasn't normal. So I was so grateful for the flexibility I had, and I was so conscious that moving to another role, I wouldn't necessarily get that flexibility. And then COVID changed that because it made flexibility much more common and much more acceptable. And I became much more confident in knowing that that is a core part of how I can do the job that I do. And the flexibility goes both ways. You know, I work when I need to and I make sure I get my job done, but I want the flexibility to also be a present parent. So that environment changed. I changed. And actually my youngest daughter started school. And I had this moment of thinking, oh, actually, I can do something I want to do. I can choose what I want.
After everything else in your life was sorted.
Yeah.
Then you could finally make a decision.
Yeah, exactly. And so I intended to take summer off, have a bit of time at home with the children, not have to worry about childcare over summer and how I was going to manage that juggle. And I got introduced to Rob and Willie, the two co-founders of Rebalance Earth, had a coffee with them, and much like you said earlier, just got completely sucked in. I was really excited by the proposition. I was really excited by what they could do, how they could deliver it. So started working. I ended up having a week off instead of 4 months, which is crazy, and worked part-time over summer. And then in September, when the kids were back at school, went to full-time. And yeah, I never thought I'd be here. And I'm so glad that I am. I'm so happy I did it. But yeah, completely different to what I thought.
So as a mum of 3, what do you or don't you do to try and be a good role model for your kids?
So I've got 2 boys and a girl. And I try really hard. So especially with my daughter's the youngest. And especially with my daughter, I try really hard to make sure that I am focusing on all of the things that she's brilliant at. And she's a very girly girl. She's always wearing party dresses. But I think it's really important to not always be saying to her, oh, you're so beautiful. And so sort of building her confidence in you're clever, you're capable, you're smart, you're a good friend. And I'm really conscious of that, particularly with my daughter, but also with the boys. I'm conscious of bringing up the boys to not have predefined gender roles. There was a moment I had as a mum when my eldest was about 3 and he'd got like a Lego set or a Playmobil set or something, and there was a train driver in it and it was a woman. And he looked at it and he went, why is this a woman? Women can't be train drivers. And I've always been really passionate about diversity and gender roles. And so I was like, no, women can be train drivers. And I ended up having this argument with a 3-year-old about whether women could or couldn't be train drivers. But it really made me realise that even in the environment where, you know, I was working full time, what he saw was very different to what he believed, because there's a whole environment set up with these really strong gender roles in it. So I'm really conscious of making sure that all the children understand that they can do whatever they want to do, and that to be really good at something, you have to put the effort in. And, you know, there's a thing about if you spend 10,000 hours on something, you're the expert. But you can't expect to be the expert when you've just started it. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. My kids get really frustrated when they're not brilliant at something straight away. So we spend a lot of time talking about the effort that you need to put in to become an expert. But mostly I hope that what we are modelling for the children is what will influence them. So, you know, we don't have that predefined gender role. Me and my husband both have full-time jobs. We both are involved in childcare and housework and all of those things. And I hope that really influences what they believe.
What the normal is for them.
What the normal is, yeah. Absolutely.
I haven't told you this, but my first impression of you.
Oh, no.
Because obviously I met you at an away day.
Yeah.
In the summer.
Yeah.
And we sat in that room for basically a whole day, the team, and we were, you know, discussing, and it was sort of the first time I had met more of the team. And I just remember thinking everything you said, you didn't say that much, but everything you said, I was like, oh wow, she's like serious. Like she knows what she's saying. Yeah. And I remember calling my mum after and be like, you won't believe it, Rebalance Earth, there's this new woman that's come in and she's amazing. And like, it was so funny.
Do you still think that now? Now you've got to know me better. Don't answer that
I
question.
remember being really impressed and just how you held yourself in that room. And like when you chipped in, I was like, oh, like, wow, that really, I was just remember being like, she's super cool. And I'm so excited.
Though, because at that point, I'd probably only done a few weeks and was still really finding my feet. Yeah. So going back to what we were saying earlier, what I felt on the inside probably didn't match how I was coming across on the outside. Yeah, no, I just remember being like, got to write down everything she's saying. I mean, that's well and truly gone now, huh?
No. So obviously you and Anne helped me a lot during the preparation phase of before that event. But I'm just interested, how did you get to the point where you gave me some really good advice and it made a massive difference to how I then delivered it on the day. But how do you get to the point where you can give advice to me? And
I don't really know. I've really shied away from doing public things for a long time. So being on panels or speaking at events. And I think there is a statistics about the likelihood of, so a man is asked to speak on a panel and they are much more likely to say yes, even if they're not a complete expert in the field. Whereas a woman is much more likely to say no if they feel that there is anything that they're not 100% on. And I definitely feel like I've fallen into that historically I feel like I've needed to be the expert. I need to know that people want to hear what I've got to say. I've got something interesting to say. And I think the reality is you don't need to be the expert to be able to talk about something and have an interesting opinion or have a different angle on it. So I've pushed myself more to do these things. And we've got a new head of marketing who's pushing me really hard to get on with it, which is great. And I'm really pleased that he is. But it is outside of my comfort zone and it feels like it's a risk and it feels like it's something hard to do. I've had lots of advice from people. I've had some coaching, which was amazing. And that's really helped me. But also what we were talking about earlier, like I do it my way and I can't do it any other way. I don't feel comfortable doing it any other way. And sometimes, that's a bit maybe quirky or a bit different to other people, but that's okay because that's who I am. And I think that comes across as much more genuine.
Yeah, and I think it's also true. So obviously, within like my friendship group, we've all been applying for jobs in the last couple of years. I definitely found it's a bit different from when I was applying for jobs, because I was like sending cover letters to startups, but when there wasn't really a job description.
Yeah.
But I found that a lot of my friends, when they were applying for jobs, and unless they had ticked sort of every single box, and not just ticked it, but were really good at absolutely everything on their job description, they were just not applying for these jobs. And
that's much more common in women than it is in men.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, that's not, like, in some ways, that's selling ourselves short. One of the things I love about my job now is that there is enough that I know how to do and I feel comfortable doing. But also there's lots of stuff that I am figuring out for the first time. It's a different environment.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it exciting and interesting. So there's no point in selling ourselves short and doing something that we know we can do all of it brilliantly, because then we're not learning and we're not developing ourselves.
And also, I always remember I was speaking to a friend of mine, and we were just saying, like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Is that you don't get this job.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time on the application, so it's.
But
so
you'll
that's
still
it.
probably learn something through the process.
Exactly. So it's sort of like comparing what is the worst case scenario is that you just don't get the job, and that's fine, and you move on and you look somewhere else. So I think it comes back to that.
I do think, though, you learn from that process and you learn how to prepare yourself better. And I mean, the first interview I ever did for a proper job, I was awful. I mean, I look back and I think I can't believe I interviewed so badly. I mean, to the point where there was a glass of water and I just really wanted to drink water, but my hand was shaking so much I couldn't drink the water. And that's because I hadn't prepared properly. But I didn't know how to prepare properly. And so I needed that experience to realise what I needed to do to be able to go into that environment. Clearly, I didn't get that job. I think spilling water on the table might have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
Well, I remember, because I had a number of phone calls with Rob before about just getting some work experience. And I had about 3 phone calls. And the first phone call, I remember hanging up, and I went downstairs to my parents, and I was like, I just completely messed that up. Because it was the first time I'd had such an intense phone call with so many questions. And I then had a number of phone calls after, so it was fine. But I doubted myself immediately after that call. I was like, I've messed that up, and that's a shame, kind of thing. And
I wonder what he thought afterwards. Maybe we should ask him.
Yeah, let's ask.
Yeah, because I wonder if he actually saw that at all, or had a completely different perception of that phone call.
I know.
It'd be quite interesting. I had a conversation with a coach the other day talking about how you view things, and you think that the whole, like, you do something and you think everyone's looking at you going, I can't believe she did that, and why hasn't she done this yet? And the perception you have of other people's thoughts. And then when you really put yourself in their shoes, she did something really interesting. We were having a conversation about something, and she told me to physically move to another seat to get myself in the mind space of what that person was thinking. And it's such a minor thing, but it really helped. And then when you think about what that person's really thinking, they're not really thinking, oh, she's messed this up. They're thinking, how do we get this done? Or, and you just assume that there's a critique of you in other people's heads that probably doesn't exist most of the time.
No. And I think hopefully that's what happened.
I'm going to ask him later.
In the phone call.
I'll ask him later and let you know.
Yeah.
So let's move on to mentoring and coaching. Who has had an impact so far in your career?
So you, obviously.
Obviously.
Well, no, because I remember a lot of people were telling me I should get a mentor and think about who you want to have to sort of support and guide you. And I actually reached out to one of our family friends who I've known for a really long time. They used to be our neighbours. And I just sent her a message saying, I've been told to reach out to the most sort of the woman I look up to the most. And I said to her, look, it's you. Please, can you be my mentor? And she accepted, and she has a very busy job. And she still gives me her time. And she really gives me her time. And she really listens to me. And I'm, so grateful that she'll give me her time. But also I've looked up to her a lot. I always remember, even when I was little, thinking that she was very impressive and incredible, but she was also very present with everyone, with you know, me with her children, with everything. And I just always remember, I've just always looked up to her a lot. And so when I finally came round and I could ask for a mentor, it was sort of a no-brainer for me that I was going to ask her.
And are there any pieces of advice she's given you that particularly stand out as helpful?
It's actually similar to the stuff that you and Anne were telling me. And it was, she just tells me and has told me quite a few times just to back myself and be confident and sort of like have gumption with what you do. So a lot of her advice has just come from just keep doing what you're doing, but be confident and back yourself.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's funny, isn't it, that it's actually, when it comes to it, it's advice that's just really obvious. I think the difficult thing is, though, how you put that into action.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is watching people who you look up to do it and sort of lead by example. So when we were having that day, the roundtable the other day, can I say with all the lawyers? Can I say that?
Yeah, we had a big meeting with lawyers.
And I think a lot of that comes down to who you look up to and watching the people that you look up to. So the other day we had a big round table with loads of lawyers and you just held this room of lawyers and it was really cool.
Yeah,
you know,
I loved it.
You led the whole room, everyone was listening to you and it was so impressive. And I remember thinking that's you know, that's so impressive. I look up to things like that.
I loved that. And that meeting was, I mean, our lawyers were amazing in putting that meeting together. And we had lawyers from lots of different parts of the business and helping us to make sure we've got all the links in our proposition. And yeah, it was amazing. And I equate that to when things are running like that, it's like conducting an orchestra of like, it just flows and it just feels really good. And so I was so excited about that meeting. I never thought I'd say that. I was so excited about a meeting with about 15 lawyers. But I was really excited about it and I really enjoyed it. And we just got so much out of it. And I felt it was good in that way of like...
Yeah, it had a really good rhythm. And energy.
Yeah. And that's the sweet spot when you're doing something like that and it's interesting and you feel like you're doing well. And those moments are really special. And I think actually what we often spend time doing is thinking about the things we could do better. And we spend very little time thinking about the things that we've done really well and the things that we're proud of. And I think it's really important to take those moments to think about where was I a year ago? What's changed? And what am I proud of? And what have I achieved? And really that understanding your journey and where you've come from and what you've done and what you've achieved is where you can take confidence from. So what is the best piece of career advice that anyone has ever given you?
Well, I think it's come from multiple sources and they're all saying the same thing. For example, you've said it. I've had a lot of people say it to me and it's that point about just back yourself and throw yourself into things. Do things that make you feel scared and nervous because you'll get the most out of them and you'll grow the most from those opportunities. So I'd say it's just about pushing yourself to do things that are hard, but that give you a real feeling of confidence once you've done them. What about you? What's the best advice you've received?
I think the best advice I have received is probably to do something that you're interested in. Like as you go through life, different things matter at different times. And it's really easy to get caught up in, especially in a financial services career, to get caught up in the amount of money you can earn by doing different things. And you know, let's face it, that is nice and we all want a certain lifestyle. But there's no point in having all of that if you're not actually happy. And money doesn't actually make you happy. So having doing something that you care about, doing something that you're interested in, and that you feel like is contributing is the thing that makes you happy. And that's one of the things I love about being at a startup. Like, I can see the direct impact I have on what we're doing. I really care about our proposition. I think it's really good. And I think we have got the potential to significantly change the way that people invest. And that's really exciting. So I feel like I'm making a difference. I'm excited about it. And I'm contributing to what we're doing. And actually, we have fun. Like, we've
Yeah.
got a really nice environment. We have a laugh. We've got really interesting people who are all really different to each other. So I genuinely enjoy what I'm doing. And I think that's really important. I think the other thing, and it goes back to sort of the theme, what's become the theme of this podcast, I wish I'd taken more risks. I wish I had had that advice earlier in my career. And there's lots that I've learned over the last few years that I think I wish I'd known that in my 20s. So I wish I'd taken more risks. I wish I had put myself in more positions where I felt nervous and just done it anyway. And I think, and I wish actually I'd thought about my career as an asset and building my
portfolio of yourself.
Exactly. And I guess my career has almost all happened by accident, and it's fine. And I'm really happy with, everything I've done has ended up being good and has got me to where I am. But I think it could have all been more strategic. So yeah, that's probably my advice to you of like, think about you as an asset, think about building all the different facets that you need to, and be strategic. I want to ask you one other question. What's the best personal advice you've been given?
The best personal advice I've got was actually from my mentor. And she said to me, you've got to find balance. Because if you find balance, you'll be really good at your job, and also you'll be really good with everything outside of your job. So I think that's the best advice, is just remember that you need everything to have balance in your life.
Yeah. You need to rebalance your life.
Yeah. Sounds like I really set that up. Whether it's exercising, whether it's work, whether it's your friends, all of the different components of your life. Her advice was find balance with that.
I think that's probably the best personal advice I've heard, but I'm not very good at doing it. I'm very good at giving advice, not very good at doing it myself. I think the other thing I'd say is you're in your 20s and like, just make sure you're having fun. Like, build your career, think strategically, do all of these things. But actually, you're living in London with your friends. Just go and have fun.
Yeah.
Make sure that you enjoy it all, because it's such a cliche, but that time goes really quickly, and suddenly you find yourself in my seat, middle-aged and with nearly teenage kids.
Oh my goodness.
So I think we're out of time and we're going to have to finish, but I have really enjoyed chatting to you today. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned something, or at least had a laugh along the way. And hopefully you'll join in another Rebalance Earth podcast soon. Thank you.